Alrighty. How's everybody doing today? Oh boy, no response. Okay, I got a good. That's good. Okay, good. Usually silence is not good. So I'm glad that I'm getting a couple responses here. That's good. Alrighty, I'm just gonna look around real quick and check y'all in. I was finishing up some grading for my previous class. So. Alrighty, today what we're gonna do is we are gonna do kind of like a show and tell with different types of measurements. And then y'all are gonna actually do some yourselves, take some personality tests. And then you'll have a group activity where you get to talk about it. So like I said, I'm just taking attendance right quick. I really appreciate that I've had a lot of you before, so I could learn everybody else's name pretty quickly. And so it's pretty easy for me to do this. The class before you, I have 25 new students, and I feel bad because I still don't know all their names. It's like the third week of classes, so my bad. Alrighty. So we are going to talk about some of the other tests that we've talked about in class first. And I'll start by giving you a little example of what a structured interview would look like. So unstructured interview, you may or may not have some standard questions that you ask that are written down. Structured interview is going to be very regimented. And so this is from when I was in grad school, this was the SCID, the structured clinical interview for the DSM. Again, the DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It's what we use to diagnose here in the US. And so each person that came in, we went ahead and did a screener with them. So have there been times in your life when you've had 4 or more or 5 or more drinks on one occasion? All of you might be like, what? Yeah, I mean, I've done that. Right? You just want to, essentially why you end up asking that is because if they've done that a lot, then it could actually be something serious. Once or twice, probably not an issue. Yeah, things like that. And then this tells us which of the following modules we need to actually go through, right? So like if they answer no to, is there anything you've been afraid to do or felt uncomfortable doing in front of other people, like speaking? Right, if they answer no to that, I don't have to give them the social anxiety module. But if they answer yes, then I'm going to give it. Everybody got the mood disorders one, just because those are the most common ones. So as I said, this one I was like seared in my memory. So in the last month, has it been a period of time when you're feeling depressed or down most of the day, nearly every day? And then you're supposed to see if it lasts at least 2 weeks. And there are standardized questions for each one. So give you all some other examples here. So like the questions for OCD. Now I'm going to ask if you have ever been bothered by thoughts that didn't make any sense and kept coming back to you even when you tried not to have them. And then if they're like, what do you mean? It actually has like, if subject not sure what is meant. Thoughts like hurting someone even though you didn't really want to, or being contaminated by germs or dirt. When you had these thoughts, did you try hard to get them out of your head? And what would you do? Where did you think these thoughts were coming from? So they have to recognize that like, these are in my mind. I can't control them, but they're not like coming from, you know, another entity or something. If they think like, well, yeah, the aliens put them there, then you're going to want to screen for schizophrenia, right? And then, was there ever anything that you had to do over and over again and couldn't resist doing? Like washing your hands again and again, counting up to a certain number, or checking something several times to make sure you've done it right? And so that's asking about the compulsions. So the obsessions are the thoughts, the compulsions are the behaviors you feel like you have to do. And then you ask, why did you have to do it? What would happen if you didn't do it? And that gets you, you know, they often think something will go horribly wrong if they don't do it. And then there are other clarification questions. So there are those for all of the major disorders. And Again, they're all modeled off the language of the symptoms, and they kind of translate the DSM language into language that the everyday person will understand. And so the way I like it, the way it's set up is so it's like, this is the question you actually ask. I should put this over here so Jade can see it too. This is the question you actually ask. And then this is word for word, the actual criteria from the DSM. So you're able to see, you don't show that to the person, but you're able to, as a clinician, have that reference in your mind or the researcher. Because the SCID is often used for research as well. All right, so that's the SCID. Now we have some fun projectives. Okay. So I will start as we did in class with the Rorschach. So I've discovered, we cleaned out the psychology storage room over the summer. I discovered we have 3 copies of these, so that's exciting. So the cards look like this. You say, what might this be? And you hand it to the person. So they hold it while they talk. And you actually have to indicate in your scoring, at least in the method I was trained in, the Exner method, like, do they flip it around? There are like symbols where you can indicate that, because that has a certain meaning. Do they like touch it? And then you're really looking at which parts of it are they looking at? Are they looking at the whole thing? Are they pointing out just a piece of it? Are they looking at this negative space, right? And so the Exner method, you have them go through it twice. So the first time you have them just go through and say, what might this be? And then if they only say one thing for the first card, you say, people often see more than one thing, see if there's anything else you can see. And the reason for that is, for whatever reason, in order to score the Exner system, even though there are 10 cards, you need 14 responses. And most people will just naturally pop off a couple, be like, oh yeah, so like this whole thing could look like a dog, but that could look like an elephant. But you have to kind of like give them permission to do that. Then with the Exner method, you go through the cards again and you say, okay, so you said that this looked like a dog. What about it made it look like a dog? So then you're really marking down where on the card they're saying, are they using the whole thing or a part of it, things along those lines. And again, as I pointed out, some of them have just red on them. This is the one that everyone thinks looks like a bat. This one to me looks like Bigfoot. I remember this one, we were learning about the Rorschach in grad school. A friend of mine, we were all kind of giving responses. A friend of mine was, I don't know, it looks like a fuzzy rug. And our professor's like, aha, texture, that means something. And we were like, what? Again, these are purposely Freudian. So they are that's supposed to look like a big winged penis at the top, right? Like, that's fine. So we have all manner of them, and then you get to the colorful ones at the end, and if they use the color versus not, it means different things. This is my favorite Rorschach plot. It's number 10. Yes, I have a favorite Rorschach plot. You show them enough, you give it a couple times, you develop a favorite. So that is the actual materials. That's it. That's the whole material for the test is this. To score it, you get this. So this is the Exner system comprehensive workbook. I also have a giant textbook that went along with the system as well. But honestly, this is what you use. In the Exner system, you're going to use this sheet, and there are also subsequent sheets that you use. And all these little letters mean things that you translate from your notes that you took while you were giving it to the person. And then you can calculate a whole host of things that mean different things. Now, again, I have to fully acknowledge that I only ever gave this twice. And so I was like on, the low end of the learning curve. But each time to give it doesn't take that long, maybe a half hour. To score it and interpret it would take me at least 2 hours. Sometimes I think like it would take me more like 6. So there's a lot that goes into it. And like, if I got an MMPI report back, I could like interpret that in 45 minutes. So like to me, it was, I don't know if this is worth it, but I did get some interesting things. So with The Rorschach, again, these are things that you have to buy, but you might have a card like this so that for the person that you would take your notes on this, you indicate for yourself which parts of the card they're using, right? Actually circle them. And then what the book does is, let me take my favorite block button and show it you on there. Is it says, okay, here are all the different areas people can talk about, and they're all labeled. So like if they're using just this part, you know, that is, see the label, okay, it looks like D9. If they're using this whole thing, that's DDS22, right? And so all these things have different meanings, including using the negative space. That actually has its own thing. And then there are popular and uncommon interpretations for those sections. So for that lot, if you're using the whole thing, common ones that are used include things like a fireworks display or a flower garden. But uncommon things are like a monster or roots. And then each section has its own as well. And then how many common versus uncommon responses they make also goes into things. So again, this was ridiculously helpful in when you were actually going in and scoring it. All right, so that is what the actual Rorschach looks like. And then here is the actual TAT. And again, when I was cleaning stuff out this summer, I discovered that the department also owns the children's version of this, and there's a version of it specifically for seniors that we own too, which I had never seen before. So very cool. All right, so the manual here, you know, again, compared to the manual there, right? Doesn't really compare, right? And again, it's because the TAT doesn't really have standardized scoring or standardized instructions even to give it. Everyone kind of picks the cards they like to give, but it does give you at least some indication here. And give you some examples of these TAT cards. So like, you know, again, this is the one where you're having to tell a story about it. Make sure Jade can see it. And you get all manner of things, right? She's got books, so she's going off to college, and you know, he's staying behind. We've got like a reverse Princess Bride situation, right? Or maybe that's a Bible. So maybe she's really Christian and he's not, right? And that's their conflict. Or he's some sort of slave or other worker, and she's like the hoity-toity person, and who's this person, right? All those different things come into play. There's the gender reverse one, essentially, of what we looked at the other day. We've got the man upset and the woman dead, cheating on him, he's cheating on her, who knows, right? And then this one I like to show because it shows how some of them are more photoreal, right? So this one is just by a lake, there's a boat, pretty peaceful, pretty calm. The reason I like to show this one is because when I was in undergrad, the person who taught me Psych 102 was a clinical psychologist, and he had actually given quite a few TATs, and he had given them in forensic settings, so people in prison or people undergoing evaluation to see whether they were like not guilty of insanity. And he had shown this to someone who described this as, well, you know, there's a couple who've been sitting in the boat and they're watching the guy that they killed drown. It's like, whoa, how'd you get that from this peaceful scene, right? But that tells you a lot about that person's state of mind, right? So it can be really interesting for that reason. Alrighty. Next up, I'm going to show you some of the personality inventories, those larger ones. So this is the very original MMPI. I kind of love it. And so this was, they would have a Scantron sheet and they would set it here. And then it was like you filled out the answer next to the question. And then as you flipped, it went like down the row. So you kind of filled it out right to left, which is a little counterintuitive, but this guided you. And so, yes, I like mechanics magazines. First question, right? And just to give you some other example questions. I feel weak all over much of the time. You can imagine that goes on some of those hypochondriasis scales we talked about. I wish I were not shy. I believe I am a condemned person. I believe my sins are unpardonable. More people treat me like a child than a grown-up. So I brood a great deal. I'm guessing they updated that language because no one really uses brood except for chickens anymore, right? So this is, once they figured it out with the cards, this is how they initially gave the MMPI. And this was how it became a little more portable. And so this is more like an SAT booklet for it. And then you would again have a Scantron that they would answer it on. And I don't blame anyone for trying to grab everything you can get in this world. But life is a stream for me much of the time. I dream frequently. I like to read newspaper editorials. There's one question on here that's like, I read the newspaper from cover to cover every day. And that is on the fake good scale, because like no one actually does that, right? Like no one's reading all the classified ads. And I mean, maybe if you're the editor of the paper, right? You want to make sure there weren't any errors. But it's like people who are trying to make themselves look better than they are. Those are the type of questions you look at in like child custody cases, for example. Ready. And then I have the materials for the MMPI 3. And so now we've gone back to something a little more hefty, and it's no longer mechanics magazines. Well, I think they just got rid of that item. But the first item is now, my daily life is full of things that keep me interested. And then again, some other things here. Once in a while, I put off until tomorrow what I ought to do today. Generally, I prefer to be myself. I get angry sometimes. Again, that's one of those fake good ones. If you say you never get angry, we all get ticked off every once in a while, right? I wake up fresh and rested most mornings. It makes me nervous to have to wait. I have lost hope. Again, those are the types of ones you want to look at right away. Painful memories of a past event keep running through my mind. I hear strange things when I'm alone. Okay, we won't look for schizophrenia again, right there. Again, here's another fake good one. Sometimes in elections, I vote for people about whom I know very little. If you're like, no, I always, like some people, it's just hard to find information about them, right? Especially in local elections. Here is the manual for the MMPI 3. Again, we used to have like a separate book that you buy separately. This now comes when you buy the materials for your clinic, or in my case, so that you can teach out of it. And so it has just the most brilliantly helpful interpretation tables for each scale. And so, for example, I am looking at here. Here we go. The L scale, which used to be called the lie scale, we now call it uncommon virtues. This is the trying to make yourself look better than you are. It says if this person is scoring higher than 80, the vertical may be invalid. They're presenting themselves in an extremely positive life by denying many minor faults and shortcomings that most people acknowledge. Right? And then if they're scoring maybe just a little above 65, possible underreporting is indicated by the test taker presenting themselves in a positive light. So there's inconsistent responding, maybe even like a traditional upbringing we find. Like People who are very moralistic in childhood sometimes try to make themselves look better than everyone is. And then there are for each of the scales. And so, for example, that demoralization subscale I told you about, where they pulled all the like, I just feel crummy because I have a mental disorder items out and they put them together. So if someone scores low on that, less than 39, they're reporting a higher than average level of morale and life satisfaction. That's great. Good for them, right? If they're scoring a little high, they're feeling sad and unhappy. They're dissatisfied with their life circumstances. If they're scoring above 74, they're experiencing significant demoralization, feeling overwhelmed, being extremely unhappy, sad, or dissatisfied with their life. And then it has correlates for like, what are these related to in terms of symptoms? So things like not coping well with stress, is at risk for suicidal ideation, is insecure. And then it has diagnostic considerations. So what should I think about diagnosing this person with? What should I be looking at? And it could be depression related disorder here. And then it has, what should I be thinking of or looking at in treatment? Evaluate for risk for self-harm, right? If there's someone who might have other factors. Emotional difficulties might motivate them for treatment. And you want to focus on relieving that demoralization so that they can engage in therapy. Some other examples, well, I'll use antisocial behavior. That one's kind of fun. So again, if you're scoring like above 78 here, reports serious past and current antisocial behavior. The correlates are they've been involved with the criminal justice system, they're impulsive, they have family problems, and the diagnostic considerations evaluate for antisocial personality disorder, substance use disorders, and treatment considerations. Acting out tendencies can result in treatment noncompliance and interfere with development of a therapeutic relationship. And then you might want to focus on their self-control or lack thereof, right? So it gives you that for every single scale, and it has all manner of really specific subscales. One that obviously me being myself love that they added that wasn't even on the 2RF is they added an eating disorder scale. The MMPI never had that before. And so, you know, they are reporting problematic behaviors, including binging and purging. So you consider an eating disorder and focus on those behaviors as a target for intervention. There are also subscales looking at like suicidal ideation, self-doubt, stress, worry, anger proneness, substance abuse, family problems, cynicism, dominance, aggressiveness, neuroticism or negative emotionality. And then what I really love too is that they gave you like examples of here's what the output would look like and here's how I would interpret that, which, you know, again, didn't necessarily come with the previous level of the MMPI. So again, here you can see sort of how those look in terms of where people score. So this was my favorite when they introduced this in grad school. I was like, this makes our lives so much easier. All right, I also have an example of the PAI. Here again, it looks like the old MMPI or really the MMPI 3, where you've got a big booklet and then they get a Scantron. But here the difference is instead of just true or false, we've got false or not at all true, slightly true, mainly true, or very true. I don't know how you like really parse out in your mind between mainly true and very true, but cool. I'm obviously an MMPI biased person, fully acknowledge that. Okay, so some items here. My moods get quite intense. I've tried just about every type of drug. I have no trouble falling asleep. Most people have good intentions. My behavior is pretty wild at times. Most people would rather win than lose. I've used prescription drugs to get high. People I know care about me. I prefer to let others make decisions. I like to drive fast. There are a whole bunch of different things. My temper never gets me into trouble. My anger never gets out of control. Things along those lines. I rarely get in a bad mood. So that's the PAI, very similar to the MMPI. And then this is a 16 PF form. This is really interesting because the questions change in format. So like some of the questions are like a yes, uncertain, or no. And then some of them, so like this one, on social occasions, I readily come forward, prefer to stay quietly in the background. Like those are what you're choosing from, or like an in-between. So it's not as standardized as the other two. And then this is the actual where you would map their scores, like that really bad low res diagram I showed you the other day. So you can see that. Jade says thank you. No problem. All righty. So now y'all get to fill some stuff out. So the first thing I'll pass out here is the incomplete sentences test for like one version of it. So this is
the one that's on Blackboard.
yes, there
Okay,
it is.
'cause I already filled it out.
Okay, you're good. You can just kind of chill then. Yeah, and I think the one I'm gonna pass out is new, the big 5 one is new. Alrighty.
Where's the other part of it though? Is this part, isn't there like values at the bottom?
It should be on the back.
Yeah, it's not there.
I'll pull it up. It's fine. So these you're not gonna turn in, so please answer them and honestly for yourself. I'm never gonna see them. You don't have to disclose your answers to anybody else. The next thing I am passing out is the Beck Depression Inventory. So this is that standardized measure of depression we talked about. If your answer is high on number 9, again, you don't have to tell me, but I highly recommend you go see someone at the counseling room. There you go. All right, and then the last one I'm going to pass around here is a very short version of the Big 5 inventory. We'll be talking about the Big 5 personality traits a couple times throughout the semester. This is very commonly used in research. To look at various traits. And in fact, one thing I forgot to mention about the MMPI is that I think since the 2, they have had a measure of the Big 5 embedded within the MMPI. So this is something that we can even look at there. Yep. And then Jane, I'm pretty sure these are on Blackboard. I'm not sure if I put the Big 5 on up there, but I'll try to get it on there in a couple minutes once I get everybody set up here.